Welcome back to Real Talk, the show where we sit down with real investors doing real deals and uncover what's actually happening in today's market. Today, we got Kristie and John from NexKey Collective. Now, this episode is going to be a little bit different because a lot of people in this space actually focus on one thing, which is locking up deals. But a lot of people don't realize that in this business, it's not just about contracts. It's also about the closing. And especially when it comes to creative finance, the gap between locking deals and actually moving them gets even bigger. And I think that's exactly the place where NexKey comes in. Kristie, John, for the people who don't know you yet, can you give us a quick rundown about who you are and what exactly NexKey Collective do in the real estate space?
Hello, everybody. Super excited to be here. Thank you so much, Deon, for the invite. We love being here. My name is Kristie DeLouise. My background is actually in technology and user experience design. I worked for JP Morgan for about 10 years doing their design and usability, helping the website and application become more usable for customers. In the end, I was eventually helping the credit card customers or checking account customers who are looking to migrate to different types of products find the next best product through different types of digital innovative experiences. Coming from that, we realized that, and John will tell you a little bit more about the story of how we wound up falling into real estate investing, but we realized that corporate and being in the W-2 environment was not necessarily allowing enough freedom or control for ourselves. Mm-hmm. So we took a trip from New York, where we were originally from, down to South Florida. I call it my climate and cash flow trip. It opened our eyes, and we ended up now 3 years ago that was, and now we own and operate a real estate dispositions company called NexKey Collective. We focus on helping JV partners or wholesalers move more deals, and we help buyers find exactly what they're looking for. We're able to take an innovative approach because of my background in UX and technology, and John's in healthcare, as he'll explain. We're able to take that innovative approach in technology and service and help customers on both sides. Mm-hmm. We'll go a little bit more into it a little bit later, but I'll hand over the mic to John to introduce himself and tell a little bit more about the story.
You don't really have an idea about service for many people until you help the sick. And I've done that for 18 years of my life. The people either not feeling well to knocking on heaven's door, unfortunately. I've seen it all, and I've seen it multiple times. So for that, you learn how to comfort people, work within a set of parameters that many people don't know. And the reason I'm bringing this up is if you're not new to wholesaling or real estate, you're going to find out that deals go on fire. People have specific needs due to their life situations. Agents can go rogue, and everyone is quick to put up the white flag, and I'm quick to save assignment fees, and I'm quick to save sellers that are about to go under. There's waves and there's stress factors that you have to deal with. So you mentioned how I do the acquisitions, and we're mostly right now a specific dispo company. There's still a lot of help the JV partners need, whether it's locking up a deal, trying to figure out and navigate different structures and architecture of deals. That's where I come in right now as kind of a sniper. And I also make sure your deal gets across the finish line after we find that buyer. But how I got here ultimately was after 18 years in healthcare, I lost my job due to mandates. I unapologetically said taking the COVID vaccine wasn't right for me, and they fired me after working the whole pandemic on the front lines. I did the next best thing, a normal thing anybody would do. I ran for US Congress. It didn't work out. I didn't win. I only got 22% of the vote. And then a month later, without a direction, we went to Florida, as Kristie said, and she told me, hey, start looking into real estate. I think you'd be great here. And the rest is history. I'm great here.
Amazing. It seems like it's kind of interesting because both of you guys come from like totally different background. I know Kristie is from tech, you're from healthcare, John. And it's kind of interesting, like real estate is the direction you guys took. Now, obviously, I think a lot of people, they are more interested in people coming from extremely different backgrounds. What exactly would you say your first deal actually looked like? Can you give us like a small overview of it?
Yeah, I'll give you my first deal. I was getting my feet on the ground in this whole real estate thing. Kristie was still W-2 and not actually in the thick of things yet. And I had partnered with some other wholesalers, and I was doing cold outreach the way that most people start. They see this stuff online and they go, okay, how do I replicate it? And here I was making my calls. If I wasn't getting answers, I was leaving voicemails, text messages, following up. I wouldn't go away. And then my first deal that fully went under contract and closed was a hefty assignment fee. It was over 20,000. I locked that one up on a text message. So the call went to voicemail. I left a voicemail, and then I did my typical text message following it, because you don't give up. You have to keep hitting from all angles. And the agent, it was direct to agent. They said, we're going to pick the best sub two. I know you're a sub twoer, and I know you probably know the situation the seller's in. We're going to pick the best offer tonight. And I said, okay, I'm going to get you an offer. And my partner on the deal sent them over an offer, and it was a done deal. And that was it. So that was a proof of concept for me. Unfortunately, it wasn't on the phone, but it was on a text message. And it shows that, hey, persistence will pay off. This is an avenue that could really work out. So that was my first deal.
Amazing. Amazing, guys. I think thank you so much for sharing your story. And I think it's kind of like motivating, especially for a lot of people who are not from the real estate backgrounds, to see, you know what, this is actually proof of concept that you can come into real estate and you can actually succeed in the same space too. Now, what exactly got both of you guys into creative finance deals specifically? Like, was that intentional, or did you guys realize, you know what, maybe traditional wholesaling had limitations?
I'll take that one. So I think the impetus to go into creative financing was really good marketing on Pace Morby's side, first and foremost. And it paired nicely with our need. So both of us were kind of tired of being in New York after John's congressional run. We needed an outlet. So we actually wound up going down to Delray. My family had recently moved down there. And so we're like, let's take a little vacation. I was working remotely at the time. So we did a month, and it was our anniversary trip. Loved Delray, loved South Florida. We were still near family, and we looked at each other and we were kind of like, well, how do we make this a reality? We hadn't owned any assets at the time. And so we started looking into, investment properties. And when you start doing that, SEO has a lovely way of surfacing things into your YouTube channel and your Instagram, and Pace Morby popped up. I remember watching the video. Everybody probably has seen it. And if you haven't, you definitely should. It's about the bunnies and discovering those from different types of sellers and motivation. And then he also explained, it might have been in the same video or a different one, about a truck that he sold on seller financing. And I think I either texted it over to John or sent it. I was like, look at this really interesting way of acquiring real estate. Maybe we can look into this. Maybe we can do this for our first rental. Now, obviously, it takes some time to educate yourself and get immersed into a community. What we wound up doing was we had friends who were agents down in Florida. So, started talking about the concept of creative finance with them. And what we learned that was down in Florida, at least from these agents' perspective, it was harder to buy a property because of the high equity in the properties over here. And usually when you're doing subject to, you're looking for low equity. And also a lot of the people are not motivated. Like, if you're coming in and trying to give them an offer for 5% down, nobody's taking that because somebody will come and give them a better offer. So we learned very quickly that the market was something that would depend on whether you could pitch creative finance and whether it would work for certain people more broadly than not. We wound up buying a rental traditionally with our agents, worked out fantastically. We were able to apply some of our education, like the 1% rule, will this cash flow, to that. So it was just like these little micro steps of building and learning about real estate investing. And even though we weren't able to purchase creatively, it gave us a solid understanding of cash flow and the principles that went into it.
Amazing. I think having a mentor, especially like Pace Moby, really does help in the learning curve, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
And then to jump further into it, like she sent that to me. We ended up watching a bunch of those videos, casting into the television. And then before you know it, it was the Elephant Challenge, which is what they were running back in the 2023 time. And we became baby elephants. We partnered with, there's random teams throughout the nation that were doing things. And it just, the education took off from there. And you just keep making partnerships and JVing, and you learn. You have to learn you have to hit the ground running.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it came down to. Within a few months, I had 50 to 60 people I was training. So talk about a quick turnaround. It went from getting my first deal in July of 2023, having only really been cold calling for less than a month. And then within 2 to 3 months, I had 60 people under me, and I was doing Zooms twice a week. And it's tough, but if you really want to do it, you can do it. It's doable.
Got it. Now, let's say when it comes to creative deals, right? Specifically, what would you say makes a dispo harder than the acquisitions? Would you say is it about structuring, buyer education, or would it just be, bad deals being locked up in the first place? Can you give us a little bit more breakdown on that side?
So why is dispo harder than acquisition? I think
that everybody that gets into wholesaling just puts it all on the same menu. And they're like, oh, you get a deal, you dispo a deal. You acquire a deal, you dispo a deal. But that's a totally different hat. And in one way you're buying, and the other way you're selling a deal. So when you're buying a deal, if you find those bunnies that Pace was talking about, and you find what the seller and the agent are looking for, and you make a deal, that's great. But you need to, give them what they're ultimately looking for. So when you're calling them, they're happy you're calling if you're giving them the deal they want and it works for them. That's great. But when an investor is buying that deal, now they're like, this is what I want. And it's kind of like, well, that's not exactly what you can get, because here's what I'm offering you. This is the deal that I can assign to you. So a lot of what we've noticed when it comes down to dispo and JV partners, they basically shut their entire pipeline, their acquisitions pipeline down, and they just try their damnedest to get that one deal across the finish line. And if the contract expires or they're not creative enough to continue it and work with the seller and the agent, then they're at a point where they don't have anything in the pipeline. They've lost the deal, and the best thing you have is a signed PDF with a QR code that proves somebody signed it. But ultimately, that is what I call a coaster. It does nothing, and a lot of people lock deals up that aren't good, or they over pitch because they want to get it locked up. But ultimately, the goal needs to be able to dispo it and make it a good deal for everyone.
Yeah. So
I think that creating the right deal for a buyer is a challenge, of course, because everybody's looking for different things, and everybody wants their own special snowflake of a deal. We do specialize in helping create that. However, it's also an education process. Dispo in itself is marketing, it is communication, it's education, it is follow-up, it's sales. So there's a lot of different components of this. And if you're not hitting all of those together, then you don't have a well-rounded system. And to do these things at scale, meaning move deals at scale, where you're not shutting down acquisition, as John described, to focus on one deal and just kind of haphazardly try to market, try to figure out the right scripts to sell, try to get all the people that are in your inbox followed up with. It takes time. It takes time to create those systems to do more than one. So I think that in itself is a challenge. Now, going back to where I said we do help with creating deals that work for buyers. So we might shoot it out to our vast list of buyers. We have, over 20,000 buyers on our buyers list and growing every day. We do have a marketing team who will go and actively do outbounds and manage inbounds. And we'll get, a trickle of, well, I like this deal. This is in my market. and it doesn't have a good enough entry, or the monthly payment on the seller finance is too high. Well, John and I will actually go back and take the time to work with the JV partner, work with the wholesaler, educate them on and empower them to feel comfortable in talking to the seller. John does a really great job of educating and teaching and coaching on that. And then we'll go back to that seller and try to create terms that work for the buyer as well as the seller. This is something that we like to do a win-win. The market, sometimes people still think that we're in 2022 and they think that they're going to get way higher, especially in Florida, than what they actually are. So sometimes it takes a little bit of tough love saying, this is something that you have on the table. It is likely your best offer, or you can choose to decline, which is totally in your right. We're just here to give you an offer and an option. It's totally in your right to decline it. And you might be sitting for another month or 2 months and 3 months to wait for another offer that may or may not be as good as yours. Your choice.
Yeah.
So when you position things in the right way and help them understand, you're really educating the seller, the wholesaler, and trying to do good service for the people. It's not just a money grab. This is not a let's just try to reduce to make money. It's let's try to reduce to help create a better product for the buyer and help make some sort of win situation for the seller. And sometimes that's just them walking away from the asset, because then they don't have to deal with the monthly payment or the pain or the time from that.
Got it. I think that's kind of interesting. Obviously, I mean, I think you kind of really opened my eyes, especially when it comes to the more on the dispo side. So a lot of, as you guys were saying, a lot of these mistakes can happen, especially, let's say, in the acquisition process, let's say the wholesaler, when they just try to lock up a deal just for the sake of doing it. And when they're not able to find the right buyers in the market for the deal which they're locked up with, it can end up creating problems for the seller.
And I could jump in further. I when I coach people, JV partners, just and I mean coach, not like I'm a guru. I mean like just giving you tips when I work with you. Really, I strive for transparency. I feel like the culture in wholesaling is I have to claim I'm adding it to my portfolio. In many states, that's not even legal. You're supposed to verbally disclose and explain your intent. And everyone thinks that that's going to be something that scares people away. And they're like, well, the contract covers it. And it does. The contract does specifically say this will be a sign and it's an initial spot. But ultimately, if you are very upfront with exactly how the process will work, you will, in fact, win 1,000 more deals, because I've done it. And the agents will bring and refer you to their other agents. If you're doing direct to agent, you end up getting a reputation of, oh, you're the guy that helps solve problems. And you work essentially within this whole entire world of the deal. You work to help every part of it and not cause confusion. Because there's wholesalers that if they don't find somebody and they have a 14-day inspection period, they ghost like a bad Tinder date. You're gone. Like the agent's like, well, what do you mean? My clients packed and started moving. Like you're really messing with people's lives, where instead you can say, hey, I'm going to have this amount of time to work on this. This is my goal. This is what's going to happen. And they will love you for that. They'll even extend for you for that and say, I get it. I totally understand. And like, it's just about transparency. That like, if you're taking anything away on the acquisitions front while listening to this podcast, be transparent, stop hiding, and figure out the way to pitch it where they understand what you're doing. It will help you immensely.
Amazing. So I think it's kind of interesting that obviously, since you guys both handle the entire operations for NexKey Collective, I know, John, you're on the acquisitions, Kristie on the dispo. How exactly do you guys have that entire power dynamic worked out as a couple?
Yeah, I think that it bleeds over. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you a perfect example. Kristie does so much on the dispo front. She's so good at it. And at the same point, not even a month ago, a deal came back to me that I had just wholesaled, and somebody was like, I want to sell it. I decided to change my operation. So I said, all right, let's do it. And before I even put that under contract, I talked to one of my VIP buyers and said, would you want this property? The VIP buyer said, yes. I locked the deal up. I assigned the deal. So I did an acquisition and a disposition within 40 minutes. And I mean, that was an interesting, that was the first time I did an acquisition dispo and all on my own. And I did it within like I said, within 45 minutes. It's pretty cool.
It was very impressive. I was like, oh, great. We moved a deal that we had previously moved again. It's fantastic. So, but it does come down to like understanding each other's lanes very well as a power dynamic, and then being able to kind of operate in those lanes, but then also having your own specialty. So like, for example, I might get a seller call into me because they see our name, see our presence, and they want to understand the terms. So I'll give them a little briefing of how we can help them, what we can offer. And then I'll wind up moving it over to John to underwrite the deal and do more on the numbers and sales acquisition side. When, for example, John talked to that buyer, then I had for, the quick flip, I had to then go talk to the buyer, make sure that the numbers were right from her standpoint, and then write up the contracts. And those contracts, sometimes you can automate them, but, you want to go in and you want to check over the numbers and make sure that everything's right. So that's the area that John doesn't have to focus on, that I'll just, take over and do. I think that the dynamic is knowing each other's areas, but then also having ownership of your own lane in order to create a good system.
Got it. Amazing answer. Now let's dive a little bit more deeper into the dispo side. So one of my questions would be, where do most wholesalers completely miss when they're trying to dispo a creative deal?
I think it comes back to a lot of what we were saying before. They don't tap into team members. So we realized early on that in real estate wholesaling in general, it's really a team game, and getting some of a deal is better than getting none of a deal. And if you're trying to operate 100% solo and trying to take the full assignment every single time because you're operating acquisitions and dispo, unless you are highly proficient in systems and technology, that's usually not the right case. It's more of a who can I tap in to help me? So by deploying the deal into somebody who's a reliable resource to help you dispo the deal, who's gone through it, who knows how to employ people, technology, systems, do follow up, find those buyers, communicate with them, manage the pipelines, and then handle even the closing. I can't tell you how many deals, you think that you've assigned them, and they do die during the closing process. I would say at least 1 in 5 deals don't make it to the final finish line. So when you have a team who knows how to prevent problems in that final closing process, UCC loans pop up or liens pop up, or seller decides to get cold feet, or the agents decide to pull out of the deal because they decide that they don't like sub 2 or seller finance in that moment, one random day. You need a team who is capable of handling those types of resistance in order to actually complete it. So I think that that's where most wholesalers fall short. It's by taking that solo approach or taking that I know everything approach. We all can learn more. I know John and I are constantly looking to learn. We're constantly looking to collaborate. We're constantly looking to open even our eyes. So it's just taking a solo approach.
Got it.
That's the pitfall, the biggest pitfall, I think.
Got it. And I know you guys mentioned you have over 20,000 people in the buyer list. So would you guys say, building a buyer pool for creative deals slightly different from cash buyers, or do they intertwine a lot?
I would say it's different, but there is, again, bleed over. More cash buyers are learning more about creative options and how they can utilize it, even down to, flippers, where they'll say, oh, I buy it cash with the PML, and that way I can flip it. And I'm like, well, this is a flip opportunity that you can take sub 2. And the only difference is your interest rate's going to be 2.8. And the entry is small. And then they have to work through, and they're like, well, do I get the deed? Yes, you get the deed. So there's different opportunities that the other investors haven't even discovered yet. So I think the curse of knowledge would be to assume everybody understands what you do, or that you understand everything. Because like Kristie said, we're always trying to learn. There's always 1,000 different ways this investment game is either evolved or things we haven't learned yet that you can teach people along the way. And then all of a sudden that becomes a weapon in their Batman tool belt. So yeah, there's a lot of things that can be done with the buyer's list. It's not really always black and white.
Got it. And what would you say the type of buyer actually wins in a creative finance? Is a particular niche type of people who work with maybe a certain number of deals, certain type of deals who wins, or yeah?
I think it's somebody who's flexible and able to run either more creative exit strategies versus other than just long-term rental. Long-term rental in today's market is extremely hard to cash flow unless you're utilizing larger assets, such as multifamilies. Single families just are not showing those numbers, even when you're looking at lower interest rates sub-twos, because a lot of the markets, the rental rates have declined. There's too much competition. There's more rentals on market, which means that investors are decreasing their rent rates. So you're getting less on the rent. You have higher interest rates. A lot of the inventory from earlier on in 22, 23, the 2-3% rates are moved, are picked up already. So your cash flow is getting compressed on long term. If you're getting creative and doing things like, co-living is a big strategy where people are getting a little bit more creative and trying to stretch the margins that they might have by renting per room versus using one house, and they're getting paid per room on either a monthly basis, that helps increase the cash flow. Short-term rental, I know that a lot of people will say it's dead. And in a lot of cases, it's not the strongest strategy anymore, but people are still doing it. And the experts who know how to run a short-term rental portfolio are still running it, and they're running it for different types of benefits like tax depreciation too. So I think if you're looking at different types of strategies, even doing lease options, rent to owns, look at different areas that you can improve cash flow. And then look, also from a dispo standpoint, we are leaning into home buyers. So if people are looking for their end property, we will also help find that property for end buyers. We've done a few of those. So there's always different ways to create positive situations. Unfortunately, not every property will fit those. I do think that we're going to probably see in the coming months more, we were talking about this yesterday, more pre-foreclosures, more distressed. So I think equipping yourself with the right skill set to handle those also from a wholesale standpoint is going to help the seller.
Amazing. And I know you guys have built like a strong JV process, right? So now let's talk a little bit more about into your business perspective. So let's say someone brings you a deal. What exactly would you guys say you're first evaluating? Is it the structure? Is it the exit clarity? Is it the buyer demand? Just like a quick rundown on that side.
Yeah, we take a look at the deal. We'll kind of know off the bat if it has a high probability or a higher probability than others, which will prioritize it in the marketing. But ultimately, if it's a deal that's under contract and our JV partner wants help, we're going to try. We'll give it the college try, even if it's bad. I mean, when I say bad, there's some that are, the exits might not fully be there, but somebody might want it for their own house. They might want it for depreciation, as Kristie had mentioned. So I would not take it and market it. It just depends on how much marketing it's going to get specifically, but it's a channel that would help the JV partner immensely to be involved with. So would I personally lock it up from an acquisition standpoint if I was the person making that call and looking at the numbers? No, I wouldn't pass go. I wouldn't collect my $200 and I would not move my piece on the board of Monopoly here. I would just say this is not a good deal. But I don't turn down helping people if I can, because there's somebody on the other side of the deal that hopes it moves at those terms. There's an agent that hopes it moves at those terms. There's a JV partner that hopes. So yeah, I would still give it the try.
Yeah, I think it's a business decision, right? And when you're in business, you have to put up different types of constraints and say where you're going to put your time and where you're going to put your effort. And when we made the decision to just open up deals to basically anybody and take on anything, provided they have the right documentation and the right structure and all the information's there, it was a time saver and allowed us to get more deals onto our site. So that we provide more inventory to the buyer. So we're not the one discerning and saying, yes, this might be a deal that you might want or not at that, higher first funnel level. We're letting the buyer evaluate more for themselves, which really ultimately they're going to do anyway. What I would say is by creating a system and website that allows buyers to filter and find what they're looking for more easily is then the solution, because we don't want to put an onus on the buyer, and we don't want to say, okay, we're taking in deals that may or may not be good for you, but it might be good for somebody else. We want that to be easily achievable for them. Mm-hmm. So by creating filters, ways that they can search, sort, that is something that we're working on right now. And then also using different types of AI matching on that further buyer evaluation funnel is going to be helpful. And this all to say there's a trade-off, right? The time that John and I would spend in underwriting, evaluating a deal, if it was deemed good based on a criteria that we define, is it really worth it to do that? Or is it better to take everything and then cast the evaluation onto the buyer, which they're going to do anyway? So it's like a time balance, because we'd rather focus on getting more deals, helping more people, and getting buyers more deals versus spending time disqualifying deals, if that makes sense.
Got it. And any red flags you guys look out for, especially when you decide who you want to work with?
Red flags. Yeah. If you don't really have a contract and you claim you have a contract, and then I say, where's the contract? And you say, I don't actually have one. I have a problem with that.
People who haven't disclosed that they're wholesaling, we generally like to work with people who are disclosing, because in the end, when we find a buyer and we're at the closing table and the seller is like, well, I didn't know that my mortgage is not getting paid off, that has become a challenge.
Yeah,
so
sloppy contracts
and lack of communication. So those are red flags.
Obviously, wholesalers, investors, if you're looking into disposing with NexKey Collective, make sure you guys are legit before you guys approach our friends. Now, this is one of the most amazing sessions, and obviously you guys gave me a pretty good insight, especially about the dispo process. Now, let's restart all the way back from zero, okay? Let's take a step back. No buyers. You guys have no brand, no systems. And specifically on the dispo side, how would you rebuild the ability to move deals fast again?
Man, you're putting me on the spot here.
I have stuff. That's where bird dogging falls in right now. And I have fundamentally an issue with a lot of the bird dogs that I've dealt with. And I don't know if it's kind of how they're learning. I don't know, because I didn't take any bird dog class, but a lot of them call. And now, if you think about a dispo company at its core, it's where buyers go to shop for all the deals that they want. So essentially, we are a massive digital bird dog that churns out a menu of deals that you can sort and look for in your area. So bird dogs are using our service, which is exactly what essentially they are looking to become in so many words. And then when they call, they're very insulting, they're condescending, and they've acted like wholesalers are liars and dispo companies are liars. And they've given me attitude to the point where I've actually said, let's take a timeout. Let's have a quick discussion. How many deals have you done? And I've literally gotten back like kind of silence and like a smirking 0 as my response. And I said, so you called me about a deal that I personally acquired. I had under contract, and I was being accused of lying that I actually had it. I said, well, I actually have it opened a title. Like, this is my deal. So that's first off. And I said, if you're going to get into this field, the initial thought, I think, is to make a statement with your name, and you're going to be the big man on campus. But again, as we've discussed in this is a JV partnership game, and I'm glad to work with anybody. There's a way to make this. You have a buyer that didn't know about our website and you could add on top or something. Great. There's ways to work together. But if you're just breaking into the field, I think it's highly advisable not to come up and accuse people that have done hundreds of these different types of deals in real estate that they're liars. And I just think that's really a bad approach. And Kristie's had similar interactions with bird dogs as well, and it's very strange. So for me, I would say if you're breaking in and you're looking for a deal and you're looking at JV, talk to people that have deals and say, hey, can I add on top? How can I be useful? And I have buyers. If you really have buyers, if not, be like, I'm going to find you a buyer, and thanks for giving me permission to market it in whatever way I can, and go out there and find a buyer, because eventually you will grow a buyer's list and you will make money. It's going to be hard at first, but don't take that frustration out on people that are willing to help.
Amazing.
Yep. And from a more systematic standpoint, thinking about, you have nothing from the ground up. I mean, we break it down into what is the deal, what is the market, where are the people that might be looking to acquire that deal in said market, right? So you want to obviously get eyes on your deal, posting it in the different various locations where people would go to look for those deals is really highly relevant. So some of those are Facebook. That, believe it or not, that's one of the biggest business resources, Facebook.
However, if somebody's giving you the ability to post their deal, you have to ask permission to post it on Facebook, because if you're adding on top, now you're essentially you're making who's the marketing. It gets a little more confusing when you do that.
Yeah.
Like what we do with some of our clients is Facebook also is restrictive in how many posts you can make and in what groups and in what cadence. So we do say, well, if you're an exclusive client, can you also post this deal in the group and use our phone number, direct it to our line so that we can capture those leads and follow up on them. So, from a dispo perspective, it's about making the JV partner's job easier. And from a wholesaler who's operating solo, if they were just trying to do that dispo, it's really about, posting on those channels, marketing, and then making sure that you're actively following up on them. So checking them regularly, capturing the names of the leads, and having maybe a spreadsheet of those names per each deal, saying, okay, has this person been interested in other deals in the area? How, kind of create the profile for that buyer. And maybe that you see that buyer commenting on more deals in the area. Okay, maybe you know that they're more active. So I kind of see it as being a little bit of a private eye. And it's time intensive because you have to figure out what is worth your time to spend on. So is it worth it going and talking to a buyer who just commented on one post versus 5 posts in the area? I would say spend your time talking to that other buyer, because they're likely buying a stronger number of deals.
Yeah.
So there's certain nuances and tips and tricks as you're going to search for people that help you evaluate who might be a better candidate to work with. And then it's also about qualifying them too. So asking them how many deals that they've done, asking them their level of experience, because we want to put the right person into the right place. Once again, making sure that everything is more protected for the seller as well. So we're qualifying them if they're going to do a walkthrough, getting their IDs, certain checks and balances that help you make sure that during your sales process, they are qualified and they're the right person for the deal.
Amazing. I think, guys, this was one of the strongest sessions which I had, especially on the dispo side. And I think this is where a lot of people actually get a reality check, because when it comes to business, it's not just about getting contracts. It's also about getting the contracts that can actually close. Now, guys, if you're listening to this, obviously, if your deals aren't moving right now, it's probably not your leads. It's a good chance it can be a dispo process too. It can be a buyer's. It's also about your understanding of the deal. Now, guys, back to you again. What you both made clear today is that creative finance isn't easy. It requires a high level of thinking, structure, and execution. Appreciate you both for coming on to the show. Kristie, DeLouise, John, Matland. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and also about your journey, especially when it comes to building NexKey Collective and also your entire wholesaling and dispo journey. For everyone watching, we'll see you on the next episode of Real Talk, where we break down what's actually happening in the real estate. Guys, any last words before we end the show?
Yeah, it is a hard business. It's not super easy. You're not going to have a Lamborghini in the driveway on day one. And if you're starting as an acquisitions person doing cold calling and JVing or dispo, trying to figure out how to do it, there's a way, there's partnerships, and there's guidance from people that have been there and have done it, and that can actually assist you and make your throughput be much higher. So that's us, NexKey Collective. That's NexKey Collective.com. And sign up to JV with us, sit back, enjoy the ride, and let's get some assignment fees.
Amazing.
Love it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, guys. Well, guys, thank you so much for hopping on the show. Tune in, guys, next week where we're going to coming up with new guests, new insights, and new processes. With this, we're ending the show for the day. Thank you.